Welcome, everyone. We obviously would love to do this in person, but we're here in pandemic time, so we're making the best of it. We're trying to keep this event very intimate, so we've just got a fireside chat here with someone that's very important to Cyberhaven and has given us a lot of great direction, and we're very fortunate to partner with him and his organization to try to bring innovation to this market. Just a few logistics. So we are recording this session. And if you want to ask questions, feel free to come off mute and jump in verbally if we're talking about a topic that's relevant and you really want to ask Arlen something more about that specific topic. Or if you want, you could queue up a question in the chat and we'll be monitoring there and get to those questions throughout the session here. So we're very honored to have Arlen McMillan with us. I'm going to let him introduce himself and give a little background on both his firm and his own personal journey in information security. Arlen, please tell the audience.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Howard, and everybody for joining today. Arlen McMillan, Chief Security Officer for Kirkland & Ellis, international law firm, corporate litigation, restructuring, a whole number of matters we work on. I like to think we're number one in the world. There's a couple of people represented here from other firms that would likely give me strong reason to say I'm number two and they're number one. I respect that and I appreciate your attendance here. Who am I? I've been in this business over 25 years, started in technology, worked my way through as an engineer before I jumped into management and leadership. Found out I loved security when I was working at a bank where I was a second engineer hired on to build what is now considered online banking. So all of your commercial online banking. The team that I worked at ABN AMRO, we built it first. And when we were doing over 20 billion in transactions a month with our corporate clients, it occurred to me that maybe we should have a focus on security. Maybe that might be a good idea. So I put a proposal in front of my boss about how to restructure his team. He looked at it. He said, Arlen, is this a nice way to tell me that you're resigning because I don't see you anywhere on this org chart? I said, no, I want to do security. I don't know exactly what that means. And I want to do it for you. And I want to do it for ABN AMRO. And he said, great, go figure it out. And that's how I got into security. After that, worked in consulting, PwC, where I was advising financial services clients on their security programs. Technology and security programs, head of security for the city of Chicago, United Airlines, and now here at Kirkland. I suppose the long-winded, all of that rather long-winded, the short of it is I've had the pleasure of working in a number of different sectors, protecting critical infrastructure, protecting critical data, high availability and integrity systems. So I've really been blessed with an opportunity to work on a number of different things in different sectors.
Great. So let's talk about the topic of the day, or the topic of the hour, data protection, and how Kirkland has reimagined it. As background, I think it'd be great to share with the audience your experience deploying products in this area, the programs that you've built to try and protect sensitive data, and then what your experience has been with those products and programs.
Sure. And I think my experience is pretty common to most everybody, right? So I've been deploying DLP, endpoint, network, server-based DLP, which is your standard play when you start talking about data protection. That's one of your main go-tos. I've been deploying it and running it for a long time. I started doing it at the bank, and I did it at each one of these organizations. At Kirkland too. I'm just replaced it. I got rid of it. We can talk more about why we made that decision in a bit. But I have deployed it. I think it's one of those things that when you start getting serious about data protection, It's one of those standard things that you go do, and makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of good benefit that you can get out of DLP, and there's a lot of cons with DLP, only one of which is it is a bear to manage and maintain. We can talk more about that if you'd like, but it's one of the reasons why I was always looking for an alternative to get out of that space. But you know, that's my experience. I've done it 4 times, 5 times now. I've deployed it, and I don't think I'll ever have to deploy it again. I sure don't want to.
Yeah, you in the post you wrote on LinkedIn earlier this week, you wrote DLP is dead, and you wrote long live data lineage. We're going to come to data lineage in a minute, but tell us what you meant by that. Why is DLP dead?
Yeah, you know, it's been a walking zombie for a long time. Right, it's been half dead for a long time. But the reason why it's never been fully killed, nobody's chopped the head off, is because we really haven't had an alternative. It fit a need, and I don't want to besmirch, you know, DLP totally. Right, listen, I know how we deployed it at Kirkland. We did it in a very focused way to solve very specific use cases, and it worked. 100% it worked. But we also went into it with eyes open. We were not going to do all the things that the vendors say you ought to do with it or could do with it. I've tried that before. You know, I didn't want to have to hire, you know, 10 people just to run my DLP or 5 people just to run my DLP program. And that's really what you need if you're going to take DLP and maximize it to its fullest capabilities. It is a bear to manage and run. So that's what I mean by it's dead, right? People have been wanting to kill it off for a long time. I don't think there's going to be anybody that's going to disagree that it's a pain to manage and maintain. But we haven't had an alternative.
Yeah.
And that's why for so long as in zombie status.
And even when you've had those opportunities to invest the personnel and the resources and the budget into making the program work, I think you would agree, and I'm sure many people in our audience would agree, it's still fundamentally a flawed approach to the problem of data protection. And so tell us about that. What are the big problems? What are the big gaps?
Yeah. Number one, it tries to address the problem in a backward way. Okay, so what are you trying to solve? You're trying to identify and prevent inappropriate movement of data. Fundamentally, that's what you're doing, right? Even if you're not in a prevention mode, even if you just want to know where data is going so that you can choose to act on it, it's upside down, right? So what do I mean by that? When you have, most common way to deploy it is endpoint DLP, right? You can have network-based DLP, which I think is highly ineffective, but that could be another conversation. I stopped deploying that a long time ago. And then there's like discovery DLP that you run on servers or your storage to find data. And then that's fine. You don't have to have a DLP. You can use other techniques to do that. And it's good to know where your data resides, and that's fine. There's lots of problems with that. It's very static. It's high false positive rate. But let's put all that aside. The main way people use DLP is on the endpoint. You have to tune DLP to say, look for bad and then report on it. Okay, that is a very reactive way. Well, first of all, you have to know what bad is. How do you learn about bad? Well, you learn about bad because you've got some creative people and they can come up with known things which are bad, and then you'll alert on it. But the reality is the very serious ones, the very ones that you want to pay most attention to, you don't know about yet, right? So it's the problem of you don't know what you don't know, and DLP is reactive, not proactive. Right? They try to do proactive things with like regex finds on like character strings, like SSN has a very particular pattern match. Driver's license kind of has a match. How about cardholder data? Okay, that's not too bad. How about medical records? terrible, right? I was HIPAA security officer at City of Chicago. We had medical records on the majority of people in Illinois. We were required, I was HIPAA security officer at United, very small program there, but at the city, we tried to make sure we were doing the right thing with our constituents' data. The false positive rate of using these types of regex fines or hits is through the roof. We ended up turning it off, right? So if you're like these kind of keywords don't work, which is a little bit of a proactive approach, and you're always playing in this reactive space, you're always going to be in a loser's game. And that's what I mean, it's upside down. And then the second one I said there too, the other is just the false positive rate on all of these things. To really get to a very high confirm positive and accuracy rate, you have to really be tagging all of your documents. Now, we do that at Kirkland. All of our documents get tagged with a special set of characters, machine readable characters. So I know I can do things about those documents. I can read them. I can understand where they flow. Mm-hmm. Very, very few people have the capability of doing it. Yep. They try to say, if you see the word classified or sensitive in a document, then you can't do these things with it. Well, news articles have the word classified in it, right? That very high false positive rate sinks DLP programs, and it makes them super cumbersome to manage in a way which is effective.
Absolutely. And let's talk about your industry, your business, law firms, and you know, we'll expand it a little bit to professional services firms, accounting firms, you know, organizations that have a lot of high value data. They deal with a lot of client data. They have obviously a high percentage of their data that they're working with is sensitive and they must protect. Tell me about what are some of the unique challenges that you face in this program, thinking about your current role at Kirkland.
Yeah, you know, I think you can break it down into, you call it two different things, volume and differentiation. Just from a pure volume or volumetric perspective, law firms are professional services, even, you know, Big Four consulting. While we do very different things, we have very similar challenges in that we have a lot of documents, we have a lot of information, not only proprietary that we develop for our own consumption, but also obviously from our clients. It is an absolute requirement that we maintain the confidentiality of this material. That is non-negotiable. You know, what is kind of the traditional security response when you're told that you must protect this data? Well, you know, lock it down to, you know, the least privilege principle, who needs access, only when they need access, and only how they need access, right? So limit it as much as possible. But it doesn't really work in professional services organizations. There's a lot of data sharing. There's a lot of cross communication. There's a lot of teams changing constituencies, be it either a legal team or groups within the organization from a knowledge management perspective. This is one of the things why clients hire us, why they hire Big Four, because we can work together and leverage our learnings from prior experience to maximize the benefit we bring to this client or this matter. So this kind of volumetric perspective, all of this data that you need to be able to protect while also facilitating access to. It's a real interesting dilemma. And, you know, I've had this conversation with a lot of folks in the legal sector, and, you know, a lot of them struggle with it as well. We think we've got a great set of solutions when tied together, provide robust protection, robust visibility, and protection. Data lineage plays a big role in it. DLP played a role, but is now thrown out the window with data lineage. and what we can do with that, because it's just much more effective. So from a differentiation, the last piece on that, I kind of mentioned this before about tagging your data. Most organizations, non-professional services, you're going to have maybe 5–10% of your data might be considered critical. Well, that's 80% of our data, right?
Yeah.
Just by saying something is critical in our environment does not necessarily mean that you can wrap all of these super lockdown controls on it. You have to have controls which are elastic and flexible and reflect the needs of our attorneys, while as well as protecting it at a very high bar.
Yep.
That's difficult to do. That's a hard problem to solve. We think we have.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of organizations struggle with it.
Yeah, and many big name firms in professional services have been in the news recently because they've been subject to ransomware attacks. And as we all do in information security, we follow the money, aka follow the criminals. And the criminals have really started to target professional services firms. How much has the onset of ransomware changed the prioritization of addressing this problem?
Ransomware has been a game changer in so many ways. But it's interesting how you solve for ransomware. The fundamentals of how you solve for ransomware haven't changed, and they don't necessarily change based upon. Let me rephrase. Good security, fundamental good security, solves many problems, including ransomware. Now, that's your fundamentals. What are some of those fundamentals? Stop lateral movement, manage your creds, privileged creds, don't have shared creds on your endpoints, be very aggressive in your patching, good security, all of that CIS, CSC, it used to be CSC 20, I think they're now down to 18 in their latest release. Do your 18 controls, right? Do these things and get your good cyber hygiene down well. That will address a lot of security risks. It'll really lower your profile. It blows my mind how many times I hear about somebody being breached and they hadn't patched something in 3 years. Okay, I don't know what to do about that, right? Colonial Pipeline, what was it? It was patching and open RDP and a bad password that hadn't been changed, I think, in a couple of years. That's cybersecurity basics, right? How did Experian, I think it was, that got breached. It was a struts vulnerability that had a patch for, I think it was 18 months. They hadn't patched. A lot of these major breaches can be addressed by doing the basics. Now, here's the thing. That's commodity ransomware, commodity attacks. The next group is your more sophisticated attacks. These more sophisticated actors are not going to be stopped by good security hygiene. That's where you have to now start layering more sophisticated controls and techniques and processes to give yourself a fighting chance.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think many of these breaches are obviously self-inflicted, but like you said, the motivated attackers are going to find a way in. And I think we have to have that mindset that, just like in the antivirus world, we no longer have the mindset we could keep the malware off the machines. We have to assume that it's going to get on the machines, and we have to do a better job of detecting it and responding to it. Aside from the onset of ransomware, what else is happening in your business and in the world around us that you think is making this topic of data protection a first-class topic, something that has to get addressed, something that's being talked about in boardrooms? Why is now the moment to reinvent and reimagine data protection? Yeah, so let me go back to ransomware for a second. Well, I talked about all those things about how to protect yourself and some of the good practices there. What I really think has brought to the head of how important data protection is how much ransomware is impacting data.
right? So if you think about attacks in the past, the vast majority of attacks were financially motivated. But ransomware is still too, right? But what were they after? They were after credit cards. They were after retail, be it Target or something like that, or they were trying to steal data that they can monetize, right? What's happened with ransomware, and when I say it's really changed the paradigm quite a bit, and not just me, everybody is pretty much saying this, but the way it's changed is it's locking up everybody's data, right? This is not just one server. This is whole swaths of an organization are now being locked up. And now people don't have access to their data. So it's really bringing it home how data is king, right? Data is the most important thing. Lives on servers and moves over networks. You have an opportunity on your server, you have an opportunity on your network to identify and stop bad, but in the end, it's all about the data. Everything that we do is all about the data. So I think it's really refocused the mind of a lot of people. Not only in security, maybe it's pushed up the thinking in security folks, but on the business side, people are really starting to get, if I don't have my data, I can potentially be out of business. I can rebuild a server. I could re-image a server. Give me a couple hours. But if I don't have my data, I'm out of business. And I think that has been the biggest game changer that has refocused everybody on how can I protect the data. Now, I think there's some really cool technologies out there about ransomware and how to stop. And I think there's some really cool technologies coming up. But in the end, so much of it revolves around data protection. And I think that's why it's becoming so much more on the forefront.
Yeah. If you could start with a clean slate, start with a blank sheet of paper and design some products and solutions that would help you address this problem.
Yeah.
What do they look like? What are some of the ideas that you've had about how to really build an effective data protection program for the modern era?
Sure. This is wonderful things about one of the many wonderful things about Kirkland is I've always had a vision in my mind of what a good security program ought to look like, and I'm building it at Kirkland. It's just a fantastic opportunity. Over the past 5 years, it just as a professional to have this as an opportunity. I won't say it's a greenfield, but hugely supportive of the security program. So, what are some of those things? So it's more than just imagining, Howard. Mm-hmm. I'm actually doing it, which is pretty great. Awesome. And what are some of these things? How about identity aware network, right? So everybody talks about network segmentation. Super important. Port protocol, typically. It's all object-based. It's not identity-based. Super hard to manage, maintain, and typically full of pinholes that people forget about and bad guys know how to navigate through. And then you get some sort of self-propagating malware like ransomware, and they'll find the pinholes, right? So traditional segmentation models, while important, are rife with failure. And I'm not saying don't use them, DMZ, particular networks, totally, very important. But identity-aware networking, that's cool, right? So Howard, you and me, you log on one machine, you work in finance, you see all the finance systems. You log off that machine, I come back on that same machine. I'm in HR, I only see the HR systems. I don't see any of the finance systems. I'm able to manage the network in such a way that it's based upon an individual's identity. Mm. And if you can't see something, it makes it real hard to hack into it, or even just make a mistake. So identity-aware networking is one of them. More on that segmentation side, we've worked with, sorry to name other companies here, but Illumio. I'm a big fan of them using their Edge product, which really prevents lateral movement on the endpoint. Mm-hmm. So my endpoints on the same flat segment don't see each other. Yeah. Right. So those are a couple things. I'm really, really very interested in a new wave of products that are coming out. Definitely data lineage, and you beat everybody to the punch on that one. I didn't see it coming, but now I'm an advocate. I'm a zealot. The other is really around what I'm calling secure enclaving. That's not the right way to call it. But it's how do you create a protected workspace on a device you don't control? So this is the whole BYOD. It can be on a corporate managed device, but how do you create a secure enclave where you do all of your business work, applications processing, document creation, all within this secure space, so that even if the device gets compromised, everything you're doing is protected. Lots of benefits in a BYOD and remote workforce world. I used to be a huge advocate. I could never really do it because the technology never really worked well. This whole concept of toasters and terminals, right? Going the old is new again. So don't give people these super powerful machines. Give them a little toaster on their desktop and then Citrix everything so you can manage everything remotely. I've always wanted to do it. Technology never could do it. And now I don't think we have to go that route anymore. We have these other new emerging capabilities. So that's what that's a lot of what I'm looking at right now. In data lineage, understanding where your data from creation, modification, storage to distribution, knowing that full life cycle is hugely powerful. And it's definitely one of those leading technologies that I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
Real quick, I got a question that came into the chat that ties into the data lineage a bit, and tagging and I manage as well, and document management systems. So like, if you have a good document management system or a good approach to tagging, like where does data lineage still come into play to help solve some of that? And then how are you using tagging and document management systems to help as well?
Yeah, I wonder, if I was starting right now, I wonder if I actually needed to do tagging. I think data lineage replaces the need to do tagging. Now, tagging augments lineage, so I'm not going to stop doing it, but I wonder if I need to do that today. So how am I doing it? I manage document management system. All of our data goes into that. Very common in professional service, definitely law firms. And more organizations outside of ProServe are actually picking up this as a capability to manage just the proliferation of documents and data that they have. So DMSs are becoming more and more a thing. They're a wonderful thing if you're thinking about it. Run, don't walk, go do it. What we do is we have all of our documents in the DMS, and then what we do is through the DMS, we actually tag. Think of it as kind of like watermarking. It's not really, it's in the metadata with machine readable codes. Those codes are read by our systems so that they can act upon them in a variety of ways. Maybe the super special document ought never go out to the internet, never leaves the house. That's easy to do, right? I can read that code. I can stop it at my perimeter immediately, right? I can stop it on the endpoint, right? Now, that's when you know something. What if you don't know something? This is where data lineage comes in. This is where it starts saying, hey, I saw this document come from this repository. This repository is known to contain, very important information. You didn't tag that document. You have no classification or understanding of that document, but I know where it came from. And then it went over here, and that doesn't make sense. Yeah. You can take action on it, and the system is able to see it from start to finish and take action on it. And if you want, prevent it from going to the internet, or preventing it to go from Jane to Joe. This is a level of control and visibility which it hasn't existed until very, very recently.
Yeah, we've got a question here from someone in the audience at Gunderson. Does data lineage take information classification into consideration through its whole process and life cycle? And how does it do that?
Yeah, it can, right? So it depends on what you mean by data classification, right? You can have a 4-tier data classification: confidential, sensitive, internal, public, whatever, however you've organized that, right? Please, I hope you haven't done more than 4. Don't go 5 or 7. You're just setting yourself up for lots of pain. Don't go more than 4. We have a data classification process. It's important, I think, everybody to have one. And they're difficult to do well. Okay, why? Because the end users are creating documents, and you're essentially asking them to do all the classification, right? Are they going to have to tag the document? And this is a traditional program, not our program, but traditional programs. Classify it based upon these rules. Well, end users don't do that. Let's just be real about it. They're not going to do it, right? So now they're not going to do it, which means you have a policy which isn't being implemented, and you don't have data to inform your tools or to react off of, right? Okay. Another reason why DLP doesn't work, right? Because all those things are dependencies are important for DLP to work, right? So if you're even doing that partially successfully, let's say 25% of your documents are being correctly classified, that can only inform and make better data lineage because it's a data point, right? But you don't need it anymore. I suggest you continue doing it because there's lots of other benefits, but it's not a hard requirement anymore. And that's one of the reasons why data lineage works and DLP doesn't.
What was your aha moment when you realized how game-changing data lineage could be? Was it a specific scenario or use case that was presented?
Yeah, it was my main architect. I remember we were in the room together. My main architect, Gopher, he looked up. He said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And it was one of my other guys was testing. He's like, "Why do you have that document?" Now we were testing things. Now perhaps we could have tested with a different document. But my architect wasn't looking for that document. He didn't set up rules to say, if this document goes out of these confines or is used in this particular way, then throw an alert. He just saw it, right? Because the system saw it and it jumped out. And I was in my office and I did my own peek around the corner. Why are my guys yelling at each other? And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool, right? And that was my aha moment. When you can have that visibility without setting up the alerts, without doing all of this groundwork of all this identification groundwork, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have another question here from Steve Hazlitt, but I'm going to reframe the question a little bit. What data lineage represents, at least to Cyberhaven, is it's the how. It's how we're doing something. But the what we're building, we're not building a data loss prevention tool, a DLP tool. What we built, we call it data detection and response, DDR, not to be confused with Dance Dance Revolution, which I think is Arlen's favorite game.
I am excellent at it, by the way. I challenge anybody.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you've got folks in the audience that would love to take you up on that. So DDR,
so long as it's not video recorded.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Howard, go ahead, please.
So data detection and response. So it's not about incidents. This is Steve's question. Why does every DLP tool call everything an incident? We don't call them incidents. We call them risks. And with data detection and response, you're looking at all the data movement, not just the specific policies that you've pre-authored, like you said, but you're looking at all data movement, and you can apply machine learning, you can apply analytics, you could apply policies, pre-configured policies as well. Those are different ways to analyze the data set that you're collecting through data lineage and then analyze it for risk. Tell us about, what you plan to do with data lineage to identify risk. What are the things that you're looking for that data lineage can uniquely provide visibility into?
Yeah, no, that's great. So it's all the standard stuff, right? Things going out of channels where they ought not go out of. We work in a way to maximize, to really reduce friction in our environment, right? You can set up an environment where everything is super locked down. You have to have a FIDO to log on to your computer, or you have to triple authenticate. All of those things work, and they don't, right? The reality is when you set up all of this massive security infrastructure, the reality is that people will find a way to get around it. And you, in the end, have actually reduced your security posture. And this kind of purist position that a lot of security folks take, I don't think they fully appreciate how much they're actually shooting themselves in the foot. So we work in a way where we take a much more surgical, using a scalpel, not a hatchet, to solve problems in a unique and creative way. So it's being able to enable our end user, our consumer, to be highly effective, agile, with as little friction as possible. So all of those things, right? But more specifically, to answer your question, it's really to find out what I don't know. That might sound a little evasive. I promise you it's not. What this allows us now to do is to see things that we weren't aware of before, right? Again, what did I say about DLP? The problem is it's backwards, it's on its head, right? I know all the rules. I can take all of those rules out of my DLP and I can make them effective in this world as well. Got it. Okay, lift and shift. But that's not the power. The power now is I have all of this other visibility, all this greater opportunity of learning, how data is, how is my business actually using data, right? There's some pretty cool things that can come to play here. Maybe I can make a recommendation of how they can be more effective in their job. Yeah. Maybe I see them, using, I don't know, I'm going to make something up, using a staging system to share work, right? Well, okay, you can do that, but maybe we can actually bring in some collaboration tools to help you out. So there's some power here in learning what you don't know, as well as potentially being much more effective with the business and helping them be more effective.
Yeah, it really is a whole different way to see your business, the data that's flowing through and driving your business. Absolutely. We've got another question here from Mike Levinson. He's asking, does Data Lineage also have the ability to see the stuff that's in the cloud apps, in SaaS and cloud apps? And obviously Imanage is actually one of those. So he's specifically asking about stuff that's in O365, for example. Do you have the ability to see not just the stuff that happens on the endpoint inside your environments, but also the movement of data in SaaS and cloud apps?
You do. I think this is one of those where I just kick it back to your team, and then you guys give the list of all the capabilities. I know we're using it in a way that we see visibility. It's not just on-prem.
Yeah. And yeah, Mike, the short answer is absolutely. It's a huge part of why Cyberhaven is the most comprehensive data protection product, because we can see everything that's happening both on the endpoint and in the cloud. And as you know, more and more of the user workflows are cloud only. You're sharing stuff through the cloud apps where you're never bringing the document onto your endpoint. Maybe in the legal profession, you still oftentimes edit files locally, but in many other businesses and industries, you just share it with your business partner through Google Drive or Office 365 or Box or what have you. So those documents and files are not landing on the endpoint. A share today is the equivalent of attached to an email and send an email. And so absolutely, we want to cover those use cases, and Cyberhaven's absolutely working on those, and we have many of those covered today. You touched on something, Arlen, earlier that I think is really important here, the user. And in professional services, I think it's probably no more true than in your business that if you impede your users, you're really impeding your business. Right? You slow your users down, they're billing less hours, it's hurting the revenue of the firm, right? So how do you think about bringing users into this equation to help them, to enable them to remove roadblocks, make them productive, but also make them part of the solution here around data protection?
Yeah, no, we take a very collaborative approach with all this. And I want to be clear. Listen, I have a responsibility to each one of my attorneys to make sure that they are highly effective every day. I also have a responsibility to my firm to ensure it's well protected, right? Standard balance. So I want to be clear that the user is not always right. The customer is not always right, right? We do say no, absolutely. And we do put in appropriate guardrails, absolutely. And I'll not come into any conversation thinking I know the full answer. That's just hubris. And I think a lot of security folks get into trouble that way. They know exactly the right way to do it. Well, you know one way to do it, right? Maybe you don't have all the information to inform your decision. So one of the key things that we do is we have a whole, we do QA, we do deep QA at many levels, where we, not only in the early stages, just kind of like a business process analysis type conversation. We're thinking about doing this. How do you think this might affect you? All the way to it doesn't go live until it passes a couple toll gates, where we have groups of users, attorneys, and staff that see it live, that work with it over a period of time. You know, this is taken directly out of the page of consumer testing. I really treat my folks as consumers in many ways. They're not just recipients of, you know, the decree from security, right? They have to work with it. And if they are not, if it's not effective, not only from a security perspective, but also from a usability perspective, then they're, again, what I said earlier, they're going to find ways to get around it. And in the end, you will have lower security in your environment. You know, shadow IT is your typical example. They're going to stand up some cloud instance. It's super easy now to rent a machine in the cloud. Super easy, right? Microsoft just announced what their new program of doing desktop as a service. Get your full machine, 30 seconds or less. You do full servers, SaaS, super easy to stand up these capabilities. And it's difficult unless you just build amazingly thick walls around your environment and limit the capabilities of your end users. It's difficult to prevent certain things from happening. So build it and they will come. Build a quality product, build a quality environment. People in the end want to do the right thing, so support them in doing so by having an effective environment.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't get an attorney to always follow the rules, then I think everyone else in the audience that works in, you know, technology or pharmaceuticals really have no shot, right? So you really want to.
Let me pause on that. Yeah, we've got a very highly educated workforce, right? And that's wonderful. Lots of benefits there. They get it, right? There's a lot of people that are working in organizations where people might not get security, might not really fully appreciate it, might not have the ethical responsibilities that attorneys have to do the right thing. And all they're interested in is getting till 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock and shutting down. Right? That's a risk.
How do you educate your users? How do you provide them the right context and make sure that they're informed about policies and also they're aware of some of the risks that they're putting on the organization? How do you go about that?
So all the traditional ones where, you know, we do training and, you know, we do phishing testing and we use these things, all those traditional ones. But really the most effective is where you can, in my opinion, you can make it real and in the moment. right? So if somebody's doing something and in that moment, you can say, yeah, no, that's not a great thing to do. Don't do that. And maybe here's why, or here's an alternative way. Or maybe you can just say no, but then follow it up with a phone call. That's highly effective. That's that personal connection where you can educate somebody without berating them. Nobody reacts well to that, right? But being able to, in the moment, be able to identify what bad looks like for them is by far the most effective.
And we've spent a lot of time talking about technology. We've spent a lot of time talking about different products. Let's take a step back and think about the program goals. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for our audience in how to even think about this program and setting up the right goals that are realistic and also mapped to their business needs?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about that. What do you mean by that, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can approach this. In the end, the fundamental goal of a security program is to protect the organization. Number one, that's my number one job. Maybe number two is stay out of the media, mm-hmm. Right? Now, how that looks like from a tactical perspective, or from year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that might shift a little bit, but that's fundamentally my job. Now, how do I do that? I have had the real pleasure of being able to work with a number of CISOs across multiple organizations on guiding them on how to build their program. And the number one thing I always say is get the basics done. Get it tight, just focus on the basics, right? And then start layering on top. And the basics can take a couple of years. This doesn't happen in 1 or 2 quarters. If you're running admin on your endpoint, oof, right? If you're not having a robust patch management program, oof. You don't have good patch management, you don't have a good asset management. Oof. You don't know what you have on your network? Okay. This is going to take a couple of years to clean up. And it's going to require a lot of investment, if not financial, then just pure energy investment from the organization. Right. But beyond those basics, then you start looking at really how can I get embedded in the business? Right? How can I really help them out in a way by either providing tools or addressing particular risks that they may not even be aware of? But that's the next level. That's your higher level, higher order, getting embedded in the business and really having these conversations and understanding what they're doing. Listen, I know security really well. I'm not an attorney. Right? The only way I'm going to learn how to be an attorney or how they work is by talking to them.
Yeah, you touched on a number of basics that I think have been basics in our industry for years, decades, maybe. What do you think? This I hope this isn't a loaded question. Is data lineage? Does that become one of the basics? Is that table stakes a few years?
Really interesting. That's really interesting. I think it's time is to tell, if I may. Data lineage has been an idea that's never been realized until recently. Mm-hmm. I think understanding where your data flow, it hasn't been one of those table stakes because people didn't know how to do it, right? So that was one of these things that, everybody said know where your data is, but wrapping protections around it were primary, where the effect is protecting data. Right? It was almost secondary. And at the same time, everybody's saying data is king. It almost was counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense. Now that we have these greater capabilities around protecting data, I think it will. I think it has a good chance of now becoming one of those table stake items.
Yeah.
Right. as more people understand what you can do now from understanding the full life cycle of data. I have to admit, I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah.
I think we're working and we're ahead of most people.
Yeah.
The vast majority. I firmly believe that.
Yeah. I think
and
that's,
we're still figuring it out.
yeah, I think that's obvious to the audience here that Kirkland and yourself, Arlen, you're really leading the industry in innovation and think about this problem in new ways. You know, I'll just add, you know, the reason why we're able to even build data lineage products today, it's because the underlying technology stack has evolved so much in these last 5 years. You know, you have these massively scalable analytical databases like Druid and ClickHouse and these kinds of tools. If we didn't have those tools, we couldn't build CyberHaven. You know, and you know, and if you try to build a data lineage product using off-the-shelf graph databases like Neo4j, which is one of the leading graph databases in the market, you're going to have major problems because those databases are built for very short depths, as we call it. Basically, you know, they're built for things like social media where you might have a few connections or a few degrees of connection that you need to explore. But when you're talking about data lineage, the data is moving many places and people to many places and people in the organization. So the depth of the movement and what you're trying to track and analyze is so much more than these off-the-shelf tools or that were here, you know, in prior generations. It's only in the recent few years where we now have a technology stack that enables us to build a data lineage product that actually works, that scales. And so I really do think that we're on the cusp of something big here, and you're obviously out in the forefront here. If you look into your crystal ball a little bit, how do you think this all settles out? You know, we have more risks, more threats, more new user workflows that we have to deal with. We have new tools at our disposal like data lineage. Where does this thing all settle out? Are we still?
There's some pretty cool opportunities here. But you just talked about all these new technologies which are enabling new capabilities, new ways of doing things. This goes back to like the very first thing I said about DLP has been a walking zombie for a long time, right? People have wanted to get rid of it. It's been the walking dead. We haven't had other options. Well, now we can kill it off because we have other options. You know, what do I see? Well, think about this. This is some pretty cool stuff, right? If you know where all your data is going, if you know what good looks like, right? And I am so sorry. I hate bringing in ML into any conversation. It's one of those buzzwords. I'm going to do it. I'm sorry. But by bringing in ML, in understanding how your data, again, from cradle to grave, the whole flow and where it gets moved to, in understanding all of that, you can bring in the strengths of ML to understand deviations within these flows, right? Let's just name one. I have now, all of a sudden, Jane Doe has never encrypted a file before. And now she just encrypted 50. Huh, that's interesting. Maybe we can take action on it, right? Maybe John Doe has never accessed a particular repository, right? Now we all talked even about, you know, just behavior. All this is just all this behavior, right? This DLP is signature, Lineage is behavioral. Signature is dead. We've all known that, right? I still have IPSs, right? But what do I lean on most? My EDRs, right? Why? Because behavior. So understanding being able to understand behaviors from a security standpoint to improve response and understanding behaviors to improve business processes is huge. That's been this holy grail that we've been talking about for years, is understanding the business and being an enabler for the business, not just Dr. No. Yeah. Right? Not the Department of No. How can we enable the business in a most effective way to make them better while protecting the organization at even a higher bar? These things are pretty cool, right? Ransomware is this one. I just bring it up because it's present on everybody's mind. But I hope that starts to crack open the nut a little bit to start seeing what you can start to do when you understand the full flow.
Yeah. Yeah, you touched on this a little bit, and I know we're running out of time here. In case anyone wants to ask any final questions, please put them in the chat or just come off mute. We have a couple minutes.
Howard, let's go for another hour. Come on.
Let's do it. We got to see a dance move from you.
Oh God, no, please. Okay,
We're
we're ending in 2 minutes.
You touched on this a little bit earlier. So with data lineage, it enables you to really understand user behaviors, user workflows, maybe even talent in your organization. You see all these attorneys, different attorneys, cutting, pasting, copying from a document that one attorney created. What does that tell you about that one attorney? Right. And like you said, you see workflows.
Knowledge management.
Attorneys are like emailing stuff back and forth and, attaching files and sending the same file back and forth. What does that tell you about how more efficient they could be if they can change that workflow and put that in a cloud service or something?
100%. We have a knowledge management group that is responsible to identify kind of gold standards within our organization. Right? A full group. Why? Because this is important to professional services organizations to identify what represents the best of breed, right? There's lots of ways to solve a particular problem. What do we choose as the best way, most effective, right? So we have groups where we can make them more effective with that example, right? We can say, oh, by the way, Jane over here, created this document. To your point, that's just one simple example of how you can improve your business processes.
Yeah. Arlen, it's been a provocative, fascinating conversation. Always a pleasure to talk with you. I think if we could just leave the audience with that hope that, we could take a product that has completely turned the DLP or data protection problem on its head. And now we have the potential to maybe cross over and do more than just security, to really be an enabler for your business. I think that's pretty exciting. And you're clearly on the leading edge of that. I really want to thank you for your time. It's been an amazing hour. And for everyone in the audience, if you would love to learn more about Cyberhaven and what we're doing, please get in touch with us. And you all know how to get a hold of Arlen McMillan, the one and only. Thanks for your time, Arlen. Thank you,
Howard. And thanks for everybody who joined.
Thanks.